Behar learned the hard way that when you come for the king of shock radio, you better not miss. This is a story about power, ego, and what happens when someone finally calls out the behavior viewers have been complaining about for years. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe how this unfolds. The tension was palpable the moment Howard Stern stepped onto the view set. The studio erupted in applause, but something felt different. Joy Behar sat at the iconic table with her arms crossed, already wearing that expression longtime viewers recognized. Trouble was brewing. She had spent years criticizing Howard's style, calling it degrading, inappropriate, and harmful, and she wasn't about to let the moment pass. "Well, well, well," Joy said as Howard settled in, her voice dripping with condescension. "Look who decided to grace us with his presence. Howard Stern, the man who built an empire on shocking people and pushing boundaries. Tell me, Howard, do you ever feel responsible for lowering the standards of American media?" The other hosts shifted uncomfortably. Whoopi tried to offer a more neutral greeting, but Joy wasn't done. She leaned forward, eyes locked on Howard. Howard, unfazed, flashed his trademark grin. "You know, Joy, that's interesting coming from someone who's made a career out of interrupting co-hosts and talking over guests. Should I be taking notes on how to raise standards?" The audience gasped. Joy's face flushed red. She wasn't used to guests who could match her energy, let alone flip it back on her. "Excuse me?" she snapped. "I've been in this business longer than you've been relevant, Howard. I don't need some shock jock telling me how to conduct myself." "Relevant?" Howard chuckled. "My show reaches millions every day. When was the last time anyone under 40 chose to watch The View? I'm just curious about your definition of relevance." Silence. Joy opened and closed her mouth, searching for a comeback that wouldn't come. The other hosts were staring down at their notes, pretending to be invisible. "That's completely inappropriate," Joy stammered. "You can't come onto our show and insult our ratings." "But you can question my entire career and integrity?" Howard countered smoothly. "See, that's what I find fascinating about people like you, Joy. You can dish it out all day, but the moment someone sends it back with the same energy, suddenly it's inappropriate. That's not how this works." Joy turned to her co-hosts for backup. None of them met her eyes. Whoopi finally tried stepping in. "Okay, let's maybe bring this down a notch and talk about Howard's new book." "No, Whoopi," Joy cut her off. "I want to address this." She turned back to Howard, voice sharp. "You've spent decades objectifying women, making crude jokes, and contributing to a culture that degrades people. And now you're acting like you're the victim?" Howard shifted forward, his tone suddenly serious. "Joy, how many times have you interrupted your female co-hosts this week alone? How many times have you dismissed their opinions or talked over them? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're describing your own behavior." The camera captured Joy's stunned expression perfectly, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, disbelief written all over her face. That's not the same thing at all," Joy sputtered, her usual quick wit nowhere to be found. "Isn't it, though?" Howard pressed, his voice calm but razor sharp. "You've built your career on being the person who says what others won't, the tough questioner who doesn't let people off easy. So why is it suddenly different when someone does the same thing to you? Why do the rules change when you're on the receiving end?" Joy glanced around the table, silently begging for backup. But her co-hosts were frozen between fascination and horror. Joy had backed herself into a corner, and Howard was only getting started. "I think there's a difference between asking tough questions and being deliberately provocative for shock value," Joy tried, attempting to regain control. "Oh, absolutely," Howard nodded. "The difference is I'm honest about what I do. I've never pretended to be anything but myself. But you? You sit at this table every day acting like you're some moral authority while you bully your co-hosts and talk down to guests who don't share your worldview. At least I own my behavior." The tension in the studio was suffocating. Joy's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass, her face deepening to a shade of red even cameras couldn't soften. But Howard wasn't giving her an inch. "You know what I find interesting, Joy?" he continued, his tone almost friendly. Almost. "You talk about degrading people for entertainment. But wasn't it just last week you spent an entire segment mocking that young actress's outfit? What was it you called her? A fashion disaster who needed an intervention?" Joy opened her mouth. Nothing came out. "And the week before that," Howard added, "you spent 10 minutes making jokes about that politician's weight. Really detailed stuff. Personal attacks. But somehow that's different because you call it political commentary? That's not the same thing," Joy finally managed, her voice tight. "When we critique public figures, it's about holding them accountable." "Accountable for what?" Howard countered instantly. "Their clothes? Their body weight? Their appearance?" He leaned back with a knowing smile. "Come on, Joy. Even you don't believe that. You do it for laughs. For views. And honestly, there's nothing wrong with that. Just stop pretending you're on some moral high ground." Sarah jumped in, voice cautious. "I think what Joy means is that there's a difference between commentary and exploitation." Howard turned to her with a polite smile. "Sarah, I appreciate the rescue attempt. Really. But I'm pretty sure Joy can speak for herself, unless she suddenly lost the ability to interrupt people and dominate conversations." Scattered chuckles broke out in the audience. Joy's face flamed even brighter. "I don't dominate conversations," Joy said through clenched teeth. "I facilitate discussion. Is that what we're calling it now?" Howard lifted an eyebrow. "Joy, I've watched this show for years, and I can count on one hand the times you've let a guest finish a full thought. You've interrupted me 17 times in the last 5 minutes." "That's not true," Joy protested. "Would you like me to ask the producers to roll the footage?" Howard asked casually. "Or better yet, let's try a test. Let me speak for 60 seconds, just 1 minute, without you jumping in." Joy's eyes darted around the table again. She knew she was cornered. If she interrupted him, she'd prove his point. If she stayed silent, she'd look defeated. "Fine," she snapped, arms crossing. "Go ahead." Howard smiled, checked his watch, and began. "You know, Joy, what's fascinating about all this is that it highlights everything wrong with the current state of media. We have people like you who genuinely believe their personal opinions matter more simply because they have a platform. You lecture America about tolerance and respect, yet you show neither to the people sitting right next to you." Joy's jaw clenched. "You claim to champion women's voices," Howard continued, "yet you constantly talk over the women on your own panel. Sunny over there brings real legal expertise, but you cut her off every time she tries to explain something complex. Sarah offers a younger, fresh perspective, but you treat her like she's naive whenever she disagrees with you. And Whoopi, who has more wisdom than everyone in this building combined, you argue with her like she's an amateur. The hypocrisy is staggering," Howard concluded, and through the entire 60-second monologue, Joy physically fought the urge to interrupt, her frustration written clearly across her face. Her mouth kept opening as if she were about to speak, then snapping shut. Her hands were clenched so tightly her knuckles were white, and she practically bounced in her seat, fighting to stay quiet. When Howard finished and glanced at his watch again, he looked up at Joy with mock surprise. "Would you look at that? You actually made it the full minute." Joy erupted. "How dare you sit there and psychoanalyze me and my relationships with my co-hosts? You don't know what goes on behind the scenes or how we support each other." "You're absolutely right, Joy." "I don't," Howard replied smoothly. "I only know what I see on camera, which is you bulldozing through conversations and treating your co-hosts like props in your one-woman show. But hey, if that's different from who you really are off camera, maybe the problem is that you're just not very good at hiding your true personality when the cameras are rolling." The other hosts stared openly, like watching a car crash they couldn't look away from. Whoopi kept glancing at the producers, probably hoping for a commercial break. But this was live television at its rawest. "You know what, Howard?" Joy's voice shook, whether from anger, humiliation, or both. It was hard to tell. "I've been on television for decades. I've interviewed presidents, celebrities, world leaders, and I've never had anyone speak to me this way." "And there's the problem," Howard said, his tone almost sympathetic, which made it sting even more. "No one has ever challenged you like this, because everyone else was too polite, too professional, or too afraid of backlash. They let you get away with behavior that would get anyone else labeled a bully, because you convinced everyone your rudeness is passion for the issues. But I'm not running for office. I don't need your endorsement. I'm not trying to get invited back to your show. So I can tell you exactly what everyone else has been thinking, but was too nice to say." Joy visibly shook. "This is completely unprofessional. Whoopi, are we going to let him continue attacking me on our own show?" Whoopi finally spoke, but not in the way Joy expected. "Joy, he's responding to the questions you asked. You opened this door when you attacked his character and career. He's defending himself." The look of betrayal on Joy's face was unmistakable. She had expected her co-hosts to rally around her, but instead, they watched Howard dismantle her piece by piece with fascination rather than concern. "Defending himself?" Joy's voice cracked. "He's been attacking me personally for the last 10 minutes. Have I, though?" Howard tilted his head thoughtfully. "Or have I simply been pointing out patterns in your behavior that anyone who watches this show regularly can see? There's a difference between personal attacks and professional observations. You attacked my character based on your personal feelings about my content. I'm commenting on your professional behavior based on what I see. If you don't like it, maybe the problem isn't with my observations." The studio had shifted entirely. What began as Joy's attempt to embarrass Howard had become a masterclass in how fast the tables can turn when someone refuses to be intimidated. Joy scanned the table again, desperately seeking an ally, and found none. Her co-hosts watched with the kind of morbid fascination usually reserved for disasters. "You know what, Howard?" Her voice sharpened, tinged with desperation. "Maybe the problem is that you're just another entitled man who can't handle being challenged by a strong woman." Howard's eyebrows shot up. For the first time all day, he looked genuinely surprised. "Oh, wow. There it is, the gender card. I was wondering when that would come out." "It's not a card," Joy shot back. "It's reality," Joy shot back, leaning forward aggressively. "You can't stand the fact that a woman is calling you out on your problematic behavior, so you're trying to tear me down." "Joy, Joy, Joy," Howard said, shaking his head with what looked like genuine disappointment. "Do you really want to go down this road? Because if we're talking about how I treat women, we're going to have to talk about how you treat the women sitting at this very table." Joy's face went pale. She knew she had made a tactical error, but there was no taking it back now. "Let's talk about strong women, shall we?" Howard continued, his tone measured, but lethal. "Sunny graduated from law school, worked as a prosecutor, and has encyclopedic knowledge of the legal system. But how many times have you talked over her when she's trying to explain legal concepts you clearly don't understand?" Sarah represents an entire generation of women navigating politics and social issues in a completely different landscape than the one you grew up in. Yet, whenever her perspective doesn't align with yours, you dismiss it as naive. And Whoopi, who has achieved more in entertainment and activism than most people could dream of, you argue with her like she's an amateur, like she doesn't know what she's talking about. Each word landed like a precision strike. Joy's face cycled through emotions: anger, frustration, embarrassment, and something that looked dangerously close to panic. "That's not how I treat them," Joy protested weakly. "Really?" Howard turned to the other hosts. "Ladies, honest question. In the years you've worked with Joy, how many times has she interrupted you mid-sentence, dismissed your opinions, or talked over you when you were trying to make a point?" The silence was deafening. Sunny and Sarah exchanged uneasy glances, the truth clear in their eyes. Whoopi weighed whether to throw Joy a lifeline or let her drown. "See?" Howard said, turning back to Joy. "This is what I mean about playing the gender card. You hide behind feminism when it's convenient, but you don't actually practice what you preach. You're not supporting women's voices. You're drowning them out with your own." Joy was rattled. Her quick comebacks were gone. She clawed for anything to regain control. "This is ridiculous. I'm not going to sit here and be lectured by someone who's made millions exploiting women." "And there's another deflection," Howard said calmly. "Instead of addressing the behaviors I've pointed out, you try to shift, focus back to me." "But here's the thing, Joy. My audience chooses to listen. Your co-hosts don't have a choice. They work with you every day. Which one of us is really exploiting women?" The question hung in the air like a live wire. Joy processed it, realization dawning. She had lost control. "I think we should move on to another topic," she whispered finally. "Oh, now you want to change the subject?" Howard laughed. Genuine amusement, no cruelty. "5 minutes ago, you were ready to psychoanalyze my career and question my moral character. But now that someone holds a mirror up to your behavior, suddenly we need to talk about something else." Joy glanced to the producers off camera, hoping for rescue. But this was live television, and ratings were likely through the roof. No one would cut away from this. Whoopi finally intervened, but not to defend Joy. "I think you've made your point," she said. "Have I, though?" Howard asked, turning to her with genuine curiosity. "Because it seems to me Joy came into this conversation with a specific agenda. Embarrass me, question my integrity, and position herself as morally superior. But when the same scrutiny is applied to her, suddenly it's too much." Joy made a last-ditch effort. "I was asking legitimate questions about the impact of your content on society." "No, Joy," Howard said firmly. "You weren't asking questions. You were trying to humiliate me on national television because you disagree with my brand of entertainment. There's a difference between asking tough questions and launching personal attacks. And the irony? You just spent the last 15 minutes proving every stereotype your critics have pointed out for years." The final blow landed with surgical precision. Joy's face betrayed total defeat. "I think," she said slowly, struggling to maintain the tiniest shred of composure, "our audience can make their own judgments about both of our approaches to media." "Absolutely," Howard agreed with a smile. "And judging by the ratings and engagement, I think they already have." The commercial break couldn't come fast enough. Cameras pulled back to reveal Joy slumped in her chair, looking like she had just gone 10 rounds with a heavyweight. Howard, meanwhile, looked as relaxed as when he first walked on set. What began as Joy's attempt to expose Howard Stern as a media villain had become a public dissection of her own professional behavior. She had challenged someone who spent decades perfecting verbal combat, and the results were exactly as expected. She was exposed, defenseless, and left reeling. The other hosts sat stunned, processing the masterclass they had just witnessed. In under 20 minutes, Howard had articulated criticisms of Joy's behavior that viewers had thought for years, but never heard so directly. As the show went to commercial, one fact was crystal clear. Joy Behar had learned the hard way that when you come for someone who never backs down, you better be prepared for the consequences. Howard Stern had delivered a masterclass in turning the tables, leaving Joy exposed and the audience captivated. So what do you think? Did Joy Behar get what she deserved? Or did Howard Stern go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more unforgettable moments like this.